Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about how you should be starting to prepare yourself for the harder 3-player co-op dungeons. So 3-player co-op has been introduced into North America, but we have only got a taste of relatively easy evolution farming dungeon. So I honestly feel like this was just a case of testing the waters to make sure the servers can handle it, and there will be much harder and much more exciting dungeons to come. And because of that, we need to start preparing ourselves for the types of teams we want to bring in order to maximize our efficiency, especially if playing in the random matchmaking service. So this article will basically be discussing the pros and cons of what a strong team wants to have and essentially the components that comprise said team. So how does 3-player co-op differ? So 3-player co-op does significantly change or revamp the whole co-op experience because it's taking out a lot of the aspects that made 2-player co-op a little too easy. Most notably, we have a lot more hurdles in place because it's going to feel a lot more like a solo-esque style team or solo-esque style playthrough because of the fact that your team is an individual team, your health pool is your own, you don't share it with your allies, nor do you share your awakenings. So you can enter the team of a dungeon with your respective team and your partners can have their own, and we don't actually have to have any synergy whatsoever. While it can be advantageous to have synergy, it's not as mandatory as it is for 2-player co-op. Furthermore, there is a dedicated matchmaking system in place that will partner you up with 2 random players. And this is huge because it prevents the need from going to third-player or third-party apps such as Discord to find other players. You can just simply hit find me players and it will find you players on its own. And this is something I really wish 2-player had, but at least 3-player is at least crossing that bridge on its own. So with the ability to find partners more easily, we do have to have obviously some drawbacks that kind of make it more exciting or challenging. Because like I mentioned, there are 3 unique teams, and you can reread this on a previous article or video. Basically, I'm just kind of copy-pasting what I had from a previous article because, again, why type it out? It's summarizing the same points. But essentially, we do have 3 unique teams that allows us to basically bring whatever we want to play with. It doesn't have to be bringing the same thing as our partners. And it is less forgiving because these awakenings that were shared across both teams do not actually apply anymore. So this can be problematic because now we actually have to be a lot more self-sufficient. Furthermore, the 3-player co-op dungeons are scaled to 3-player difficulty because right now solo mode, say, is a difficulty of 1, co-op is a difficulty of 2. Generally speaking, I feel that like the difficulty level for solo mode is 2, co-op is 1, like 2-player co-op is 1, and dungeons are designed on a 1.5 difficulty. So right now things are too easy in co-op versus too hard in solo mode, generally speaking. And at least with 3-player co-op, this kind of alleviates that because the dungeons are scaled and built around the 3-player nature. So now that that's out of the way, how do we want to build our team? Because we need to build this like a solo team, but there's a few fine nuances that you can't actually do as easily in 3-player co-op mode. But when you're trying to build a team, you got to feel like it's very much like a solo team. You have to have full skill bind resist coverage, you have to have sufficient skill boosts, you need to have answers to buy-ins, high damage preemptives, as well as being able to basically function in an individual nature by having a somewhat tanky leader skill. Furthermore, you want to ideally be able to proc your leader skill off of any given board in order to basically pump out sufficient damage, because if you don't, you're going to have issues because your allies may not be able to set up the board for you. Now, in addition to that, teams that are more orb hungry or that require a bit more finesse or coordination setting up are going to be less ideal, because if you get partnered up with allies who are just wanting to play on their own, they're not going to be helping you set up or facilitate those boards. So for instance, if you have a monocolored team that needs to have multiple of that same color orb, it's going to be challenging to actually hoard those orbs because your partners are going to be matching the board anyways. So when it comes back to your turn, you don't have those orbs and you may not be putting out damage without active skills. So these are the points I want to cover that's going to at least give you an idea of what kind of team you want to run. This is kind of from a generalized point of view, and you need to just examine if the team that you want to bring in, how can it fare when you address all these key points. So the first key point is binds. Now, if your leader is not bind immune, it's going to be significantly harder because you lose access to your multiplier and leader skill, your defensive multipliers, and it's just going to be a hazardous setback overall, because you do need to dedicate some sort of active skill or sub to bind clearing, and that can be problematic. If your leader is bind immune, there's a lesser need to have bind clearing because you always have that leader skill intact. You can tank the hits, you can get through them safely, and even then you can inherit either bind clear or maybe they had an awakening to remove the binds, because you cannot rely on your allies for this recover bind awakening. It just won't happen because you can't do this across teams like you could in 2-player mode. So you have to be a lot more self-sufficient, and you have to try and plan out how dangerous are binds to my team. So like I said, you need to have at least some sort of solution to binds regardless of the type of team you are playing. Next is high damage preemptives. Now, in an ideal world, you want to organically survive any large damage preemptive without actually having to pop an active skill, because in 3-player co-op, we don't have access to that 15% health badge, so our health value is going to be quite low and somewhat dangerous. So we want to have ideally a more organic way, either through high health or through enough color resist latents to survive those large preemptives. So this is obviously going to naturally favor tankier teams like, say, Kusanagi Hime and Dark Athena over, say, Anubis, because Anubis may struggle to reach those health thresholds by comparison. But the main point is you want to have a team that is as durable as possible. In addition, you want to have full skill bind resist coverage. It may seem like common sense, but from the amount of people who have told me, there seems to be a big issue of people not bringing 100% bind immune teams because maybe they think their partners are going to cover it for them. And this is not the case in 3-player co-op mode. And if one player gets the skill bound, it actually applies to all players. So you're going to be actually a liability to your partners if you get skill bound. So in an ideal world, you want to have at least 100%, but maybe even 120% in case something is bound. Having sufficient skill boosts. Now, having sufficient skill boosts has not been as big of a concern in 2-player mode because you have skill boosts from both players. In solo mode, it is still a concern, but the fact that you get to charge actives every single turn lowers that dependency. But in 3-player co-op, your active skills only charge up on your turn. So that means every 3 turns, your active skills will charge up. So if you don't have sufficient skill boosts, you may not even have access to your base active skills, let alone those longer inherits. So in that same train of thought, you want to try and prioritize subs and cards that actually have strong and powerful base active skills, because you may not actually ever have the inherit come up. And if that's the case, you are going to be a little out of luck because it's going to be a problematic scenario overall. So you may have to reshuffle your team around to bring enough skill boosts, or even just prioritize cards with those stronger base active skills and then put something as an inherit over top for the stat transfer, or even in the vain hope that it actually comes up in time for a longer 3-player dungeon. Next is a reliable leader skill, and a reliable leader skill is something that you can activate off of most given boards. For example, a leader like Krishna is powerful, but is not going to fare as well in 3-player co-op mode, and this is because they require at least 9 fire orbs to deal reasonable amounts of damage. And if you don't have those 9 fire orbs, it's going to be a problem, because Christian teams generally like to have those fire skyfalls in place, as well as hoarding orbs and setting up the board. But in 3-player co-op, when you're playing with random players that have different teams, this is not a feasible option, because you will save your fire orbs, but your partner will just match everything, and the second partner will match everything, and then you're left with a board with no fire orbs. It's going to be a bad time for teams like Krishna, unless everyone is playing Krishna. So that's something you want to just try and coordinate with your friends through, like, not the matchmaking service, but through sharing your room ID. You want to use that if you're playing these monocolor orb hungry leaders. And as an example of strong leaders, Kusanagi Hime, Dark Athena, and Anubis are much more powerful because they are able to activate off of a given board almost every single time. Kusanagi Hime just wants to combo, Anubis just wants to combo. Dark Athena does need Dark and Water, but from a given board, you're most likely going to have at least 3 of each orb, ideally 4 Dark Orbs. But the point of the matter is these leader skills are much more forgiving and much easier to activate by comparison. In addition, another thing I want to stress is that, say, leaders like Dark Metatron, who is possibly one of my favorites, will not fare very well because Dark Metatron needs that health management. And again, unless everyone's playing Dark Metatron coordinating the hard orb usage, you're going to have a bad time managing your health otherwise. So, generally speaking, any top tier leader tends to fulfill those requirements of a reliable leader skill, but obviously you still can use these other cards like, say, Krishna. Is just going to require a little bit more work and effort on your end, and ideally your partners, because they need to try and coordinate with you without possibly even voice communication. Next is skill delay resist latents, and SDRs are going to become incredibly valuable in 3-player co-op. And this is because, like I said, active skills only charge up on your turn, so every 3 turns. So with the skill delay resist, you are able to create that buffer of protection against your active skills being delayed. Because again, if those active skills get delayed and your partners keep advancing fast and quickly through the dungeon, you may not have those key active skills ready by the time you reach certain floors, and you are going to have a bad time. Now, if you want to look up how to farm SDRs efficiently with Awoken Lube, I do have a guide and video template set up here. Now, if you are using a monocolor or orb-hungry team, that may be the only choice you have, and that's not necessarily, that is obviously less ideal, but you have to use the cards you are given with. Now, if you say don't have this problem, like you enter a dungeon with a nice ideal team, say Anubis or Kusanagi Hime, and you find a partner with those monocolor orb-hungry teams, if it is possible, it may not always be possible, but if it is, and you know your turn is before theirs, try and not match their primary color orbs. Sometimes it may not be possible because you need to hit those combos for your maximum damage multiplier, but let's say there's 5 fire orbs. Don't connect the 5, just connect 3 and leave 2 as is. You might give yourself a chance at Skyfalls, but it does at least give the chance that your partner will have some orbs left over for their turn. So again, you want to just be conscious of what your allies are using, because that way you are able to simply try your best to help set up the board for them if it is safe for you to do so. So moving forward, I do have a draft in my draft folder. Basically, that is going to be talking about power creep and what makes a card meta. It's going to be at least addressing these situations or points in a little more detail, so something to look forward to moving forward. So in conclusion, 3-player co-op is going to be an exciting time for players. It's going to at least provide a new level of challenge, as well as kind of returning the game to almost that solo-esque feel, because you are a little bit more independent, but you do have that sense of community. So hopefully these dungeons do get released in the near future. They should be coming soon. Don't ask when, because I do not know when, but I'm just going to say soon. So let me know what teams you are planning to use in 3-player co-op. What kind of setups have you been tinkering around with? Do you have any specific latents or anything that in particular you want to refine on your end? Let me know what you plan to do in the comments below. Hopefully you all have a mantastic day, and happy puzzling.